Okay, let's talk about the two primary categories of different types of power. The first important thing to acknowledge is in this dichotomy that it's not black and white. It's a gradient. So some fighters can have heavier hands with some explosiveness. Some fighters can have mostly explosive but a little bit of heaviness in their power. Most are in the gray area. For reference, on some extreme ends of the spectrum of explosive power, think people like Crawford, Tank, Canelo, Wilder, Inoue, Ryan Garcia. These are usually fighters with a lot of hand speed and torque behind their punches. On the heavy-handed side, think people like Beterbiev, Matias, Joe Joyce, George Foreman. You can normally tell the heavy-handed fighter different apart if they don't put that much effort into their punches, but you see big reactions from the opponent, like heads being knocked back. They can be high output with a lot of arm punches. Some people in the middle gray area are Lomachenko, David Benavidez, Errol Spence, Regis Prograis. Not all power is created equal. Explosive punchers generally are going to have more one punch KO power, but this also is heavily dependent on style. A style is built up around the attributes. So somebody with slow twitch muscle fibers but with heavy hands is normally going to be somebody who puts on a lot of pressure and is high output, like Joe Joyce, Beterbiev, or Matias. This doesn't always mean that they're physically slow just because they have slow twitch muscle fibers. In contrast, when you look at more explosive fighters, they have lower outputs and pick their shots more carefully. They are generally faster in both hands and feet, and they can set up the one big shot. Explosive fighters are generally going to get those highlight reel KOs like a Tank or a Crawford, while heavy-handed fighters will rack up long TKO streaks like Beterbiev, Matias, Benavidez, so on and so forth. Again, from left to right, heavy-handed to explosive, it's a spectrum. It's a gradient. It's not black and white. Some people are on the extreme sides of the spectrum, but most people are in the middle. Most of the best punchers of all time are a good mix of both. Mike Tyson is a great example. He probably has very heavy hands, but he's also very, very explosive. It's just important when you're looking at power to recognize the different kinds of power. But this discussion isn't necessarily about how much power someone has. That's for a different vid in the future. There are different kinds of power, which we could say is like an x-axis from A to B, but then there's level of power, so we could say from like 1 to 10, like a y-axis, where the level of power dictates the amount of concussive force you can generate within a single punch when all things are held equal. But yeah, this is just a quick vid. I wanted to make the distinction because oftentimes when people talk about who hits harder between two fighters, they don't acknowledge the difference in the kind of power, right? And then another thing is looking at the record isn't enough. You got to look at the fights themselves. You got to look at the impacts of certain punches. You got to look at when people are being knocked out and how. If it's TKO'd or if it's a KO, different types of things. And how a lot of it is determined ultimately is just as much as it's determined by power, it's also determined by style. Some people have a style that leads to KOs and they are normally called KO artists. Okay. Shout out to the Fight Scientist Immortality Serum out.